So welcome to Garry's Shortlist podcast. Today we're going to have a chat with Fiona Curdie from Men's Services. If you are in or run an organisation and find a lot of challenges around injury management, return to work coordination, insurances, all of the above, you must tune in. This is really insightful. Thank you. And welcome, Fiona.
Thank you. Thanks, Garry.
Thank you for coming in today. And I just wanted to congratulate you initially on your 19 years of successful business in the construction industry. I saw that the other day.
Thank you. Yes, it's been an interesting time. The business actually started as a not-for-profit. And I was the CEO originally with that business, working with the Master Builders Association and the union were half owners. So very interesting dynamic working with an employer body and a worker body. But then later we had the opportunity to change that business structure, and I was able to take on that company as a proprietary limited approximately 11 years ago. So it's been 19 years as a whole it's been operating.
And I think a very successful business that there's probably not too many people in the construction game that don't know about Men's Services.
Yes.
And the quality services you offer, and we'll touch base on a lot of that today, obviously. But taking a step right back, how did you start your career in with your OT background?
Well, yeah, humbly, my undergrad was as an occupational therapist, and I started in hospitals. So working in Concord Hospital, later in community roles in Coffs Harbour, and then I had the opportunity to work in a pain management program for people with back injuries and work injuries across Australia. The back injury. And so that's where my love started, I suppose, my passion of working with adults and working with businesses, preventing injuries, as well as managing them and helping workers get good outcomes. That was my starting point, and thankfully I've also been lucky to become a work health safety auditor. So because injury management and work health and safety, they dovetail. They're a very critical part for a business. So I was fortunate enough to do that, and then later finished my MBA, which was really, when I was, in my late 40s, enjoyed doing my MBA, majoring in human resources.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And what sort of stuff do men do? How do you describe men?
It's a really good question. I remember this great moment where people said, if you had 3 seconds or 5 seconds in an elevator, what would it be? What would be that line that you said? And I remember saying to myself, if I had a 5-second window with someone, I would say, we help you manage the most important asset of your business. And that's your people.
Terrific. And I think I've seen you do that in the past in a lot of organisations. It's certainly a challenge for construction companies to be very, very good builders and designers and the like, yet be lumbered with another thing called managing people when they're injured.
Yeah.
And
It's a really good question, and I think if you've worked in the construction industry, as you know, you have too. It's the culture is quite it's quite a strong culture. And you've got so many layers within a business. So, you've got your principal contractors, you've got your SMEs, which make up the bulk of delivery for big companies and small. So we've been lucky to work with both big and small companies. But I think that you've got to you build. That's your core business, not managing a discussion with a doctor or trying to get a worker confidence that he's not going to re-injure himself when he goes back on site again. Liaising with the supervisor that thinks it's dodgy, that, I didn't injure himself, he did it somewhere else or he did on another site. And going, well, no, the fact is he's got an injury, let's just manage it. Let's support him.
And I think...
Or her, I should say.
Yeah, I think the general tone of injury management in construction is it's all based around the builder covering their ass. And that's probably the term that's used in the field. And I think, as you say, caring for the worker and or the injured person goes a long way, and it goes a long way obviously dovetailing into safety in terms of culture. Because if I know I had a severe back injury in my earlier career.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't in construction, it was in another industry, and it was with a global firm who clearly didn't show the care that was required, and I still have that back injury today. And I just think it wouldn't have been too difficult to manage people's injuries a little better than they did, and take away a little bit of that threat around, well, if you're not back at work, you're not going to have a job. And, I had 2 little kids at the time, so I was petrified.
It's interesting you say that, because it becomes nearly a competition. You've got to then demonstrate that you are unwell. You've got to make sure and keep proving yourself as a worker. I'm actually sick. I'm actually not well. And that's counterproductive to actually a return to work. So if that worker feels safe, that they're going to be supported, and I think that's something that there's one thing that hasn't changed in the 25 years I've been doing this work, and that is, and the statistics are still there, and PricewaterhouseCoopers did a really interesting study about 8 years ago. And there's also now a wonderful study called The Health Benefits of Work, which has really, really got some very useful information on it. But one of the things is the earlier the worker gets back to work, the more support they have, the better the outcome. And that's still around.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where, from a business perspective, what we help businesses do is get that early intervention. People talk, early intervention, but they're not actually doing it. Early intervention is that call to the worker, are you okay?
Yeah.
Where are you going to go? Let's get good medical care. That is critical. We get good medical care. We have good doctors that, that we will link into throughout Australia. That has, again, that trust of the worker, and that's really critical.
So what sort of, in terms of scope, what sort of scope do you provide as Men's Services in terms of the broad range of services you offer?
Well, it varies. So as I say, we work with SMEs, so small companies, up to national companies, and even in New Zealand as well. And that can go from our 24/7 call line, so which is really great, I must admit. When we work with businesses with that, we've started the whole process on a positive note. So from that worker calling, you just say, I've just had that, this has just happened. Or it could be on site, the first aid will call and say, we've got this guy here, and we actually triage.
Right.
So we'll say, okay, what does this, what sort of depth of the scar does it look like? How much blood have you got? What can you see? No, we need a medical review for that. Let's get this fellow in. And, to the point that we had an injury just recently, to give you an example, fellow cut his finger really badly on a Saturday afternoon. It was 1:30. A lot of places have closed down by that, but we've got a doctor that I knew I could get him into by 2 o'clock, had him into the doctor, booked in for surgery on Sunday morning. That worker, felt like he'd been cared for.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your experience, where does that normally lie, that responsibility in an organisation to manage return to work, whether they're big or small organisations?
Good question. Often you find with smaller businesses, it will be with the admin, payroll, could be additional to the accountant role, the CFO even, to work health and safety.
Yeah.
They usually don't have a designated return to work coordinator or someone who's familiar with that role. And then you've got, in bigger companies, they could be lucky to have, again, it'll be with HR, work health and safety, and you don't know who it's going to be reported through to the executive team, so it varies quite a lot. And the skill and the knowledge of every person is quite different. Some small businesses might get one claim every few years. Larger businesses could be managing, 5, 50, a month.
So it's interesting. I mean, a lot of organisations clearly have a focus on culture and the care for people from the minute they onboard people to their final day at work, yet we quite often see that people with a very strong influence on somebody's journey, whether it be through an injury in an organisation, could be managed by someone who's the most junior in a company.
Absolutely. And I think then you don't they don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge or a competency to be doing that. And then also too, I think it's who is responsible. So often the business is going, well, the blame game comes in. Well, this didn't get done, and who didn't do that? But it was never clearly thought back on that whole process of management from the start, the day that incident occurred, to closing it out with the insurers and the claim side of things.
So you mentioned insurers. My favourite little topic. But with insurance, how do you find that you guys can help organisations with their insurance woes in terms of premiums that might continue to rise, or challenges from insurance companies that are genuine to say, hey, what are you guys doing in regards to your safety management and your injury management?
Oh, look, with businesses, it can be as simple as them not even lodging their workers' comp claim within the first 7 days. Or 5 days. Technically, you have 5 days to lodge a claim. If you don't do that, you pay an excess.
Right.
And that excess is 1 week's worth of wages.
Right.
Now, some of these guys in construction, they can be earning $2,000 a week easily. So you automatically, the business has lost $2,000 by just not lodging a claim within 5 days. So, we can, when we work with a business, we will review their premium. We'll have a look at their cost of claims report and say, this is areas that you can make savings. As I was mentioning before, one of the strongest statistics is the earlier the return to work, better the outcome. And what's happened now is iCare are actually supporting businesses that get their workers back to work early. Yeah. And they'll give you a discount. So if you get someone back within 13 weeks, you'll actually get a 15% discount on that cost of that claim.
Right.
And it goes down to 10% by 26 weeks, and then 5% by 52 weeks. So they're little sorts of nuances that will work with business to say, well, you could have actually saved that level of money. You're not offering suitable duties. Let's look at suitable duties registers. Let's have a look at getting fitness for work for workers, because that's huge. And let's look at the business and supervisors supporting injured workers coming back to work.
Do you find that that the injured worker would generally be more open to open dialogue and discussion with a third party as yourself, as opposed to somebody in the office that they're a bit scared that's going to leak around the office?
Yeah, I think that's a good couple of points. There's, obviously confidentiality. And they, men or women, don't like to be looked at badly. They don't want a business to think they're not doing the right thing. Most, I have the 80-20 rule. 80% of work injuries have happened at work, and they're good workers with good attitude. And you have the other part that we sometimes need to manage. But a worker wants to be back at work. They want to be productive. They want to feel good in themselves. And so if you can support them to do that, and also the team that they're working with, educating the team and their co-workers that, look, mate, if that was you and you got injured, wouldn't you like some support? Yeah. Wouldn't you like a bit of slack to help get recovery? So I think that is really important. So we start that process of discussing return to work on the first contact with a worker. When they're on the phone, we're already discussing capacity, not incapacity, but capacity.
Terrific. You mentioned, the legislation around workers' comp in particular, and then you've got insurance, and then you've got payroll, and all the complications that go with a workers' comp claim. I don't know why anyone would try and manage that themselves, because that is a level of expertise. Thinking of reporting, what sort of assistance can you help organisations in regard to their work health safety reporting, perhaps? Their registers and the like in regards to injuries, and then of course keeping a live update of every claim.
Yeah, okay. So before we go into the work health and safety, there's a lot that we do in that area, but just to even payroll. One of the biggest conflicts we have with workers, with employers, and when their relationship breaks down is when they're not getting paid at the right rate. So that's one thing that we will help businesses with, is making sure payroll are paying them correctly in the first place. And also that companies are actually seeking reimbursement for that. so that they're getting the money back.
Sure.
One business we walked into, they had $150,000 worth of workers' compensation payments they hadn't sought back from their insurer, and the insurer hadn't provided that. So that's one thing on a reporting aspect. Some businesses have got that they're managing that, others don't. They need advice and direction, so we support them with that payroll. The other thing with work health and safety, which is a big thing, is we do have a good system where all incidents and injuries can be reported through us, and we actually take that data and we have that available for a business.
Right.
So that can be so extensive, from LTI frequency rates, TREFRs, to types of the type of injury, the mechanism, location, female, male, occupation, everything. So we can provide that data, which is very accurate, to then basically we always provide a monthly update to a business on the injuries and the claims.
You said the magic word that pricked my ears was LTI rates and the like, and I think you picked up on it. I would like to think that the work health and safety fraternity are starting to see that it's an absolute load of rubbish in regards to as a good measurement of safety performance, when it's actually a measurement of past history problems. Do you find a lot of organisations still have that focus on LTI rates and ring you in the middle of the night to say that your numbers must be wrong?
Ridiculously. I agree with you there, Garry. But and LTI frequency rate is a lag. It's not a good indicator. We should not be using it. However...
Hear that, people? We should not be using LTI rates.
And it shouldn't be what the executive team measures how their business is managing injuries on their sites.
I think that's gained a lot of momentum, but my issue with that is that builders are quite often held accountable via their clients, whether it be government or big global clients that say, hey, if your LTI rate doesn't look and smell like this, you won't be working with us. So,
and interesting, you're right. We've got some companies we work with, and any health site or a lot of the New South Wales government, and I hate to put that out there, but the reality is they're using LTI frequency rates, and you cannot have an LTI on your site. They happen still. They happen. How do you control the guy that slipped?
So you see evidence of cover-up?
Well, that's what. Then we look at what behaviour gets driven.
Yeah.
If they're going to use that, and I think that's the irony of it, is that it's not a good indicator. However, builders have to use that to tender. Yes, the government still uses us for LTI frequency rates to tender. So, until that culture changes at that higher we've got a systemic problem with this. We will continue to have people that will look at how do they manage these LTI frequency rates to give the right answers.
Yeah. I haven't, in my career in health and safety, I never had a tender come to me and say, hey, Garry, we need our LTI rates and our TRIFRs and the like. However, the client is asking, what's the budget that we've got for training for that given project? What systems and innovative solutions or what programs could we run, whether they be health, well-being, etc., etc. It's all based around that negative LTI rate, and I hope that this changes in my lifetime, because I think, as you rightly point out, it's just an influencer of the culture on a project and or an organisation where the worker says, you know what, it's all about this LTI thing. I don't even know what LTI stands for, but mate, it's a bad word around here.
Yeah, I remember walking into a site we worked for a number of years, and they had written, when the workers walked into this location, it had LTI free for 367 days. Yeah. And how do you think that worker felt? Yeah. If they were the ones
who's blown the party.
It could be the barbecue on the Friday that they, and that's actually destructive, because you could have people that have got, they're starting to get an injury, an overuse type of injury. They don't report it, so they leave it, and it actually becomes worse, requiring surgery, where we could have prevented it from getting to that point at that time.
Anyway, let's get off LTIs, otherwise we could sit here.
We could spend some time on that, I think.
But back to the reporting and what you can offer organisations in regard to reporting, I think, regardless of the lag stuff, I think there's some really good stuff that you can point out in regards to trends, clearly. And that's generally, in most circumstances, in my experience, aren't really tapped into enough. When the data's there, the data is there to say, we have a trend here, but everyone's too busy digging down this rabbit hole here to actually think about the trends that are actually happening in an organisation.
Yes, I think businesses often are having to be reactive and they're constantly reacting to a situation and managing it rather than how can we look at being that proactive. Sure. And building is very much like that.
Yeah.
It's a very, very tight timelines, very problem solve, driven sort of business. With that. But I do think that when we look at what we're going to be doing with prevention is, we're still seeing lacerations and cuts at 30 or 40%, on sites. Still seeing multiple eye injuries that could be prevented with PPE. So we've still got basics that aren't been happening. But one of the businesses we're working with, they're looking at the high risk potential, which is really great. So saying it didn't result in an injury, but could have. Let's look at that system problem. But it is hard to manage subcontractors. You can have...
Well, yeah, it's good you bring subcontractors up because I wanted to point out, in my experience, subcontractors, it was like an aha moment when they say, why would you really care about our injuries as subcontractors? Morally, yes, we do. We care about everybody that works, in or for our organisation, and they don't see. I guess quite often they don't understand the level of management that a principal contractor will have in place, and quite often the smaller subcontractor just doesn't have the sophistication to understand what it is about injury management, what it is about workers' compensation, and their insurance obligations, I guess.
And that's costly for them.
Very.
If they don't do that right, it costs them. They have a smaller team. Just having someone off workers' comp and not having someone who's got the skills and the training or used to working in that team on that site, they lose productivity.
Indeed.
So I think, and then it's costly on their premium as well if they don't do it well. And then that costs the whole project as a whole. So, yes, it has a flow-on effect.
Yeah.
There's a whole flow-on effect with that process. So I think one of the greatest things that we've found managing whole sites for a principal contractor is that we get a beautiful cultural shift within that business. We get shifts within those subcontractors. And that subcontractor mightn't just work with you on this site. If they're a good one, they'll be on multiple sites, or they'll be the next year. So if you're educating, teaching and getting good outcomes with that subcontractor by us helping you manage them, you're getting a win-win, just not in the short term, but in the long term as a business as well.
So, Fiona, can you give me some evidence of a return on investment with an organisation using someone like Men's Services?
So if a business is using what we call a full stream of the workflow from early intervention through to that, we know that a return on investment will be for every $1, there'll be $3 return for the business.
Right.
And in some states we get up to $5 return on investment.
Okay.
So it's a good saving. With our good old LTIs, I know we were talking about that a moment ago, I know that we, by early intervention, getting good medical attention and care for our workers, we save between 30 to 40% LTI incidents for a business.
And it's about the care, isn't it?
It is. The care is critical. If a worker feels supported and an employer knows what to do to get the outcome, you get outcomes.
Right.
And that's a win-win.
I'll wrap up here because we're running out of time, but if anyone was interested in having a chat with yourself, big organisation or small, you've got offices in Sydney, Canberra
and Melbourne.
They can reach out to Men's Services online and have a chat with you professionals.
Thank you. Happy to speak to any business and help them, whether it's small or large, and talk about any tailored solutions.
Terrific. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Garry. It's been wonderful to sit and have a coffee and chat today.
Indeed. Thanks, Fiona.
Bye.
So thanks to Fiona. We've learnt a lot about injury management and return to work and the challenges of the above. I hope you've enjoyed it. Tune in again to Garry's Shortlist podcast, and we'll see you again soon.